Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last workshop of the Polkadot Hackathon. One second, let me grab our speaker, GM, everyone. So while waiting for the class, just like giving a little bit more context, so today is the last workshop of the Polkadot Hackathon. Amazing workshop is writing a new technology, have never stopped the creativity. So we're gonna have a talk with the Ajuna team about limitation or what kind of new possibility we have with the podcast. So first, welcome, Nicholas. Let's start this workshop again. And let me just introduce you one more time. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Encode Club Polkadot Hackathon last workshop. Today, we invited Nicholas from Ajuna team. We're going to talk about new technology, what kind of things can be enabled with the blockchain and gaming area. So please welcome Nicholas with all of us. And also, this is amazing that how many of you are joining this workshop during holiday. So this is going to be the best one, I promise. Please welcome Nicholas.
Hey, thank you everyone for having me. Can you hear me properly or no? No?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
You can hear me and see me. Good. So, yep, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. As the team knows, this is going to be, let's say, a no code workshop. The whole idea is more for me sort of to give you an overview of a bit sort of our backstory and how we see sort of gaming evolving into this Web3 space, and sort of think how we can really start thinking how this technology can enable new experiences, how it can enable developers to sort of see whether that's the gaming space or the development of apps in a different way. And so that was sort of my idea for this workshop. We have some fun bounties, which I'll share later on, and I hope to get you as much as involved as possible. So with that said, maybe I can share a screen. Let me just check that everything works.
Please go ahead.
You can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can see the front page. Yes,
Great.
now it went to the second one.
Good. So I'll give sort of maybe just a big, a small intro about myself. So hi, my name is Nicholas. I'm the co-founder of Ajuna Network. Initially, my academic background was both in health economics and investment management in the UK. Moved into, let's say, the corporate world right out of university, joining sort of big finance and Deutsche Bank in London, and later on GlaxoSmithKline, where I was working in a department called Health Outcomes, where basically what they're trying to identify is what is the impact of all of these sort of different drugs that we're taking in issues which are unrelated to health. That could be on your work productivity, that could be sort of the financial impact that you have, they have on you, and things like that. Um, Moved to Switzerland about a decade ago, and that was due to the fact that sort of after my studies and my initial corporate career in the UK, I moved back to Greece. That's where I'm initially from, as I had to fulfill my military service, which in Greece is mandatory. And after that, I got a job in Greece, stayed there quite happily. Then everything went to shit, as you may have been. For everybody that was reading, I think the news between 2007 and 2008. Greece was in the news for all of the wrong reasons, not the sunshine, not the beaches, but sort of how we were about to destroy Europe. But that sort of was also my first big introduction to um, the concept or sort of the idea behind blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. A lot of people, I think, we talk a lot about sort of my keys, my money, and so on and so forth, and how we don't like the idea of intermediaries. But very few, I think, people in sort of the more, let's say, civilized countries have sort of really felt the effect of what it happens when, let's say, big government touches your government. So in Greece, after the financial crisis, we had something called capital controls. Capital controls essentially meant that I couldn't go to my commercial bank and take out more than 50 euros a day. That was sort of the limit. And suddenly you had queues outside of banks, and really somebody was touching sort of our money. And sort of that was the first time that I really saw, from a philosophical, let's say, point of view, the impact that blockchain technology and sort of this idea of ownership, real ownership of our assets had. So yeah, sort of long story short, I moved to Switzerland after that for obvious reason. At that point, my wife got a job in a big pharma company. We moved here a decade ago. Didn't think ever that I was going to stay, but yeah, 10 years later, I'm still here. I have two kids. I enjoy video games as much as I used to, and I also have a Swiss Bernese mountain dog, which is right now 16 months old and about 50 kilos. And yeah, that's a bit about, let's say, myself. But let me talk to you maybe a bit sort of about my journey to Ajuna Network and what it is that we're trying to build. Um, so my first, let's say, entrepreneurial experience was back in 2014. That's when I was first introduced to a technology called WebRTC, so real-time communications over the web. Up to that point, I think most of us were using voice over IP, sort of, or um, Skype and things like that to communicate. And WebRTC essentially was enabling, as we see today, having meet calls or even this sort of having over the browser real time um, um, calls. So I jumped into the fitness space and tried to create sort of a Netflix for fitness. And the idea was trying to, for me, being able to invite a friend, and whether we were watching a fitness video and working out together or having a trainer, sort of that was the whole idea, how we could connect our wearable devices. Um, so that was sort of my first entrepreneurial journey. Super interesting, but I found out that sort of fitness is a really tough market, which is probably why to this date you never hear about these sort of a huge, massive online fitness company, right? It's sort of scattered things. It's sort of quite a tough market to break. Um, and about 2017, I started working uh, in sort of the blockchain and gaming space. So after a lot of sort of research, trying to understand a bit the technology. Again, I'm not a developer, I'm not a tech person, but I always need to understand to the level that I can understand what the technology to do before I jump into it. So after quite a lot of research, I jumped into the space with our first project, which was called it was EBK, which we were trying to build again an infrastructure for gaming. But at that time, what was super interesting is that we wanted to make sure that it's something which would be, let's say, compatible with Ethereum. So we're using Solidity. We wanted to make sure that it is easily accessible to the Ethereum developer ecosystem. But what we did, which was different, was that we took the consensus algorithm that was used, or a version of the consensus algorithm that was used by EOS, um, because we thought that was sort of a good way to speed up sort of transactions and things like that. Um, Technically, a great experience. Problem was that because we were sort of the lesson from that was that we were outside of any community, right? Sort of in our efforts to not piss off Ethereum community or piss off the EOS at that point community, nobody cared about us, right? Because they couldn't sort of understand. So what are we trying to do? Are we also trying to build Ethereum on steroids, which was what EOS was supposed to do? We were a competitor, we were an ally, and so I think we got lost in a way in the noise. But sort of that whole idea of using a blockchain as an infrastructure for gaming and even more specifically for game engines was sort of really attractive. Uh, and that's when 2.5 years ago we sort of stumbled upon Substrate with Cedric, that's sort of the main founder of Ajuna Network, and my co-founder who we met a few years ago. And it seemed that we were sort of on the same journey, just coming from very different paths. Um, he was coming from sort of a purely technical side, super interested in game engines and artificial sort of intelligence and experiments like that. A bit on the dark side of the moon, as he would probably say himself. So he would always try to see how he can reverse engineer a game. Quite famously, um, Cedric wrote Saberstone. Saberstone is, I think, probably the most well-known simulator for Hearthstone, which the point was that he loved the game so much he tried to be legendary. He wasn't that good, so he created a, let's say, a simulator. It didn't work out for what the goal was for Cedric, which is for him to become a legendary Hearthstone player. But it did end up being used by university students for their thesis or master thesis for several experiments there. But anyway, our path sort of met. We had sort of that same idea about um, how we thought that the gaming industry, in a way, sort of the business model of the gaming industry is quite broken, and so how blockchain could probably add quite an interesting flavor. And started working on Substrate. First thing that we did is started working on a Unity integration for which we applied for our first Web3 grant. And after sort of a few iterations and playing around with the technology, we sort of really saw how powerful palettes were as composed to smart contracts, especially sort of in the gaming space. And with that in mind, we set out to essentially create a gaming chain, right? Sort of a layer one, which was backed by the security and trust of Polkadot, right, as a layer zero, where we have our layer one, which is a dedicated chain for the gaming industry, and then we start building on top of that. So essentially, that's what sort of Ajuna's unique promise was. Now, on top of our layer one of the main things that we're trying to solve is in gaming, specifically about latency, right? Because Kusama is a 12-second blockchain. For a user experience, 12 seconds is an eternity, right? So you wouldn't be able to have any meaningful type of games in the way that we imagine AAA games today running, let's say, completely on Kusama or Polkadot for that sort of matter. In terms of speed. So one of the first things that we started working on is on a layer two, where the whole goal is how can we make sure that we can bring down latency as much as possible. So with the type of technology that we are experimenting on right now, which is trusted execution environments, we have that down to about 300 milliseconds. And then sort of how do we achieve that without having to sacrifice for privacy or confidentiality, which in gaming, surprisingly, is quite important. And why is it important? Imagine me and you playing a simple game of cards, whatever that game could be. Let's just say poker, and me having the ability to be able to see your cards. Right, the game would never be able to work properly. So being able to sort of have an infrastructure which is both fast enough and private enough is something for gaming, which was quite interesting. And obviously, we do a few different experiments, like introducing state channels, which could potentially bring it sort of to real-time communications. And hopefully, in the next few years, all of the industry is going to start building up this infrastructure in a way that game development could start making sense as an alternative, like on-chain gaming could be, let's say, an alternative. So why games? Why games? So for us, I think it always starts with passion, right? It's sort of everybody likes playing games, right? Whether those are called video games, games outside sports, some form of games. But Cedric, myself, and Andre have been sort of passionate and interested about gaming our whole lives. When you look at it from a technology point of view, what makes games super interesting is the fact that they can break through the noise and the techno bubble and sort of close that void that exists, particularly in the beginning when new technologies are being introduced, that void between the people who understand it, who usually are sort of the developers and early adopters, to a mass audience. Right? So games have the ability to abstract the technology in a way that it can, let's say, reveal a new user experience without having to sort of hit it on the head with users. One good example that sort of, at least I think, works for me of how a horrible job the blockchain space is doing in general in explaining the value proposition of this space to gaming is the fact that we keep using sort of technical terms, right? An NFT. Let me tell you about an NFT. Let me tell you about a non-fungible token. Now, the problem is it would be like me today trying to explain, let's say, to an end user, hey, try this game because it's being written in this code or that code, or it's running on Amazon Web Services. Nobody cares sort of about the term per se. So the fact that we're stuck in this narrative trying to throw terms out, whether that's to developers themselves or end users, is something which I think is doing a huge disservice to the whole ecosystem. The other thing that I think with games that can be very interesting is that they have the ability to create these sort of massively connected communities, very passionate about what it is that they're doing, not dissimilar to how the crypto space is, which can spread sort of like fire. So the fact that we can potentially get these applications into the hands of millions of people across the world and create sort of these quite engaged communities is a big advantage that games can bring. A third advantage, I would say, and last one that games bring to the space is that they're games, meaning that you see a lot of the other big topics that sort of the blockchain space is trying to tackle, right? From um, decentralized finance, from user data privacy, healthcare data, supply chain. All of these things are sort of quite big, big government and politics and voting. These are sort of big topics which have a lot of implications and a lot of stakeholders with very strong opinions. Games, again, are games. So does it matter if a game in the beginning is not super decentralized? Not really. Does it matter if the game economy is broken in the beginning? Well, as long as not as long as people don't lose money over what's going on, it's not a big deal. You can fix it. And so, what I'm trying to say here is that games allow us to experiment with all of these technologies, allowing us sort of to fail, make mistakes without having this sort of cataclysmic repercussions that we've seen the past few years happening in our space. So games are an easy way, and it's a Trojan horse, right, in a way, sort of to introduce a technology. Um, and then when we talk about that, goes back sort of to the message that we're saying before. When we talk about blockchain, sort of our space, when we're trying to sort of shout out um, into the interwebs about why people should create games on the blockchain, you'll hear some sort of general terms which are thrown out there, from ownership, right? It's important because you get to involve your community. You can reward creators, or hey, you can play video games and earn money, right? Sort of the flavor of the month. Now nobody mentions play to earn. I'm going to mention play to earn quite a few times here, just to sort of make a point of it. So why are we using technology? Is it ownership, right? Are we trying to say that the important part, for at least on the gaming space, is the ownership of these digital assets? Do we really care? Has anybody asked the gamers? Um, then we should talk about involving the community, which is sort of a message that we're trying to tell to developers. Hey, you can involve the community later on and get them to have a say in how the game is progressing. Has anybody asked the developer how they feel about having the community tell them about the game? And you'll probably see, and it is really worth just going in sort of chat rooms, whether that's Discord or anywhere else, of any big video game that you're playing. It's the most toxic environment that you will see. Um, Developers get abused, literally. So they're told every day about their shit game and how they're not updating it, and yet we as a blockchain spaces tell them, hey, how about you allow your community to be even more involved, which I'm sure that for a lot of them sounds, let's give the keys to the prison to the inmates. So um, again, is it important that any community can get involved early on? But yes, it is. But sort of the messaging that we're throwing out there, or the reason why a community should be involved, is quite different from, I think, what sort of that general perception out there is. So again, why should you use blockchain technology in gaming at this early stage? I would say the most obvious one is I want to experiment, and I don't care what anybody else sort of tells you about this space. It's an experiment right now, and why? Because of the maths. Right now, if you were to say that I'm going to build a mobile game, and there's certain platforms, right? There's two big platforms. There's iOS and Android. Now, if you're building a mobile game which is not available on iOS and is not available on Android, for who is it? For who are you building this for? So it feels like we're in a space right now where games that are being built for the equivalent of a Windows phone. Nobody has one, right? So it's an experiment. Another one is I want to capture value in a new way. I think that's worth a discussion. One of the great things that that you can do um, with sort of using these different technologies is figure out a way how you can create, whether that's a game or another app, which can capture and distribute value in a much more equitable way. And that's sort of one of the core, I think, things of blockchain technology and tokenization of assets. Um, and the other one, cost, right? Games are really, really expensive to make. They need a lot of resources and they take a lot of time. The single reason why the gaming space, the single most important reason why the gaming space is interested in the blockchain space is money. Last year was, I think, the biggest year in terms of fundraising in the gaming space over the past decade. And most of it came from the crypto space. So again, for developers, the blockchain space as a first sort of step represents a massive new source of fundraising, and it is important. From a technical point of view, it also represents a huge opportunity to minimize cost as you're moving forward, right? Because once you start utilizing the different features or products which exist in our space, you can start eliminating costs of infrastructure. You can start eliminating costs or dependencies with publishers or platforms and so on and so forth. So I think that's a reason why you should be looking into blockchain sort of today. Now the problem is everyone, literally everyone, is making Web3 games. Ajuna's making Web3 games, right? I'm pretty sure my mom is. Here, the sort of logo that I have right here is Ubisoft. Ubisoft has been in the space, like Square Enix and others, doing experiments for years. There's Mythical, right? Mythical, one of the biggest sort of blockchain infrastructure in the space, which just recently, a few days ago, as you heard, joined Polkadot. And there's a reason why they joined Polkadot, right? And it's not because we have a huge community and gaming is thriving, it's because we have a future-proof technology where trust and security is the foundation upon we want to sort of build upon. Streamers, video game streamers, from Dr. Disrespect to anybody else, is making a game. So keep that in mind. You're not alone. Um, so what is a Web3 game, right? Most of the things that you hear around sort of the space is, something NFT, terms about, if it's a Web3 game, it means that you have your wallet, and if you have your keys and you own it, or you're going to get a token and it's going to go to the moon, or it's on chain, bro, or all of these things. Just terms thrown out, where the more important sort of context of gaming, or why all of these things would hold true, is sort of missing quite a lot. Um, Maybe I'll just to share sort of how this space has evolved. I can maybe share a bit the story of Animoca, which was actually our first investor, right, during a period when we were trying to explain to them why we were interested in building a game chain on Polkadot. And as you can understand, they were, in the beginning, they were sort of quite surprised. But their story has a lot of successes. Was not that different to us. Animoca Brands was a very successful mobile game developer, right? During a period where still sort of we were in this hyper growth phase of the adoption of smartphones, right? So as long as the smartphone market was growing, mobile gaming was booming. Cost per acquisition was super low, and a lot of smaller studios like Animoca Brands could thrive simply by mobile gaming. Sort of to give an indication of the size of gaming, gaming in general is about a $250 billion industry a year, out of which over 50% of it is from the mobile platforms. So unfortunately, hardcore gamers, PC gamers, or console gamers are still not sort of the biggest market. But anyway, Animoca was a mobile game developer, which caught sort of that end of the big wave of mobile games and reached that sort of peak where suddenly smartphone adoption, plateaued not because it was not doing well, but everybody got a mobile phone. So the minute that sort of curve plateaued, it meant that the cost per acquisition for, let's say, marketing dollars for gaming becomes super expensive. So they were almost out of a business model, and just like what we're doing here today, they joined a hackathon in Canada just to sort of figure out different things in the space. And that's where they met this team who eventually ended up developing CryptoKitties, right? And being sort of the first NFT project, or sort of the first implementation, let's say widespread implementation of an NFT. And what they did very well at that point is that they made sort of that hard decision that said, we're going all in. We're stopping completely anything that has to do with Web2, and we're going to go all in in this space. Now, that small team that eventually developed CryptoKitties later on became Dapper Labs. Dapper Labs are the ones that developed again sort of some of the most famous, I would say, or most used Web3 products, such as sort of the NBA Hot Shots or what it's called, and yeah, eventually a company still owned by Animoca Brands. And the way that they see sort of Web3 gaming is um, is quite different of what we understand gaming to be today. They're sort of all in, and they believe in this sort of community building, community driven approach. And it's super exciting when you get to work with people who are sort of so passionate about creating new experiences for their end users. Um, So yeah, I don't know how interactive we can be here, but I guess you will have to let me know. I can also start to see um, a few questions from Ben. Ben, I will get to the questions, but sort of I thought um, maybe just sort of for fun to just look at a few different games and see what would a Web3 game look here. So one example would be a Call of Duty, a battle royale, so a massive online multiplayer game which is real time, or a sports game like FIFA or Hearthstone, or sort of a turn-based game like Hearthstone, or a fighting game. And you'll see that once you start looking at different genres, and then you take that sort of blanket statement of Web3 or NFT, it means nothing. Right? It's sort of saying that how about we have it, as I said before, how about let's have it on Amazon Web Services, or you sign in with your Hotmail or your sort of another social login. So maybe I'll take a few different sort of genres and see what, at least in my view, would make sense today, what can be achieved with the technology, and what sort of could make sense. Um, but before I get into that, maybe I'll answer a couple of questions here from Ben. How you manage the gaming community backlash against NFTs? Well, actually, that's a great question, and one that we struggled quite a lot over the first year of Ajuna Network, and still struggle. Meaning what? That we ideally would like to be able to talk to a sort of a gaming community, right, without thinking about whether it's a crypto friendly or not crypto friendly. What we discovered during this process is right at this point in time, these two communities just clash too much. If I start talking towards a gaming community about NFTs, they shut off completely. And so for us, where it's really important that we embrace the technology and build Web3 experiences, we are not trying to talk to traditional Web2 gamers at this point. Um, we don't see how we can add value to them today. Maybe a bigger publisher can, or um, a bigger project, but I don't think for us. So what particular technology did you use to improve the playability of your blockchain game? That's a great question, and I'll get to that, Ben, when I talk a bit about our first season and what we used. But yeah, let me just sort of jump a bit to give you some examples of how maybe you should be thinking about this technology, and how game design is more important than the actual technology. So let's take Call of Duty, right? Sort of a real-time game. Would it be able to run on chain today? No, right? Not in the sense that we understand it. We don't have the latency. We don't have sort of the throughputs to be able to have these thousands or millions of or sort of interactions happening in real time. But the question is, would we care for a game like Call of Duty to be on chain? Well, no. Gameplay, you wouldn't care. You would care about sort of very specific things that could be um, done on chain. So let's think about Battle Royale, right? Again, where it has hundreds of people in the same area, in the same map loading in. The technology running on a centralized server today would make much more sense. What you could do, how you could use sort of blockchain technology, was in different ways. That could be in order sort of to capture outcomes and make sure that these outcomes, whether that's sort of the start of the game or end state of the game, is captured sort of correctly and is on chain. You can do something like that. Or people can start thinking about more creative ways to implement this technology and reward participants. So what would make a battle royale game successful? The basic thing is that it needs to be populated, right? It needs people to participate in that, or else there's nobody that's sort of going to play here. So making sure that you can find ways to incentivize people to participate in the game is a way that sort of a battle royale would probably work. Now, Hearthstone, I'll take that as an example before I move sort of to the next one. But I encourage you to do sort of that exercise for each different type of genre, right? From a single player to a Warcraft game, which might seem more obvious, and you'll find out that yeah, it's the answer to everything is not NFTs. Let me go to the next one. So now I'll get to sort of what we did, and hopefully that answers a bit of the questions here, or sort of the thoughts here shared with um, by Ben. So for us, at some point quite early on, last middle of the year, we sort of decided that we're going to go and build an on-chain experience. What we wanted to achieve was sort of a number of different things. So the most important thing for us was to figure out how can we create a product or a mini game which would act as a community onboarding product, right? Because the more that we talk with game developers, we see that sort of there's two big issues that they have when they're starting out their sort of game development career or their project. How do I get money, and how do I get that initial community? So we saw what was happening in the industry, and we said that, you know, what we can do in here to support them is create a product which would allow them to do exactly that, raise awareness for their project, and at the same time being able to raise some funds. Now, the second part that we were interested with the Awesome Ajuna avatars was how do we take the NFT out of the equation? What do we mean by that? How do we take this value-driven approach to getting your hands on these avatars, NFTs, or in-game assets? And the third part that we wanted to deal with head-on is how do we deal with 12-second blocks? And we're referring here to sort of Kusama network. Now, as the title of sort of this um, sort of workshop says, is that new technologies never stopped creativity, right? So you shouldn't let the blockchain limit you at all. Think about the first sort of mobile phone, not smartphones right now, and the most popular application was a game, which was Snake. You cannot get more limited in terms of technology from a simple dot matrix screen of an old Nokia phone. Yet somebody figured out an interesting way to occupy that space. Then, when sort of smartphones came along, you would see a lot of these platforms, whether that was Apple itself or Google, going to the big publishers and telling them, "Hey, you know, come publish games on my smartphone." And publishers will not touch smartphones, you know, with a not even, they thought it was a joke, because they said, why would I put a game on a inferior both screen and power in terms of device, and how am I going to make any money out of this? Nobody buys anything off the app stores, right? We're sort of conditioned in buying 199, 299 purchases. If you saw a $70 game on an app store, you would never sort of buy it. So the technology was there. What was the problem was that they couldn't figure out a way where a successful business model could thrive under these sort of limitations of that technology. Limitations of a smartphone being sort of, again, small screen, no controls, and so on and so forth. But what made sort of the huge change there was when they discovered the game loop, or the business model that made sense for the platform, which was free to play. Without a smartphone, we would never have sort of this free to play business model, which we can debate its merits, but that's how it went. So yeah, limitations of technology have never stopped creativity, and games have sort of the way of using that technology in a way that can be, as I said, we can abstract the technology in a pretty fun way. So for us, when we started crafting an on-chain game, the whole idea is that, again, we wanted to make sure that these NFTs that you're going to end up with have value, not because of the price, but because of the game dynamic or the game loop that we created. So again, as probably most of you have had some gaming experiences throughout your life, you remember that you might have gotten into a game quite a lot. So for me, I can remember during my university years that Xbox had sort of just come out. There was this game called Halo, which I could sit with my mates in a, you know, and play co-op, and I really cared, to the point that years sort of later, whether that's a Master Chief, which is sort of the protagonist of that game, or some items really meant something to me. They had value for me. Forget about the number, the collectible. So they had a collectible value for me. So value in digital assets starts because you've had an experience with them which makes you care. Then comes sort of the financial aspect of it. So for us, the inspiration was really the Panini stickers. Right? I don't know if any of you know what that is. Is that so? For example, every few years when there's a World Cup, there's a new sticker book with all of the teams and the athletes and everything going on. And the way that it works is that you go into a shop, you buy the sticker pack, and an empty album. Then you go back home, start opening your sticker packs. It's awesome. You get new stickers, you put them into your album, and it starts filling up, filling up, filling up. Problem with that game or that experience is that eventually what happens is that the the dopamine reward from opening these packs keeps going down and down and down. Why? Because your album keeps filling up, and suddenly you start opening packs where out of, let's say, five, six, seven cards that are there, maybe you can use only four, then only three, then two, then one, and sometimes none. And you end up with sort of this stack of uh, duplicates. Then the second part of this game sort of starts, which is let's go now at school. I put my pack of cards in my backpack. I meet with my friends and we start exchanging them, or we start doing stupid games, stupid competitions about how I'm going to get, his Ronaldo and from the other one somebody else. So that was sort of experience that we were thinking of. How can we take this Panini experiences, transfer it online in order to have the NFT be the end result of that experience? So in this case, sort of the being that the complete album, right, that I've completed the album and it's nice and it's viable because every sticker comes at the end after I've worked for it. So we worked a lot on the game loop. Some of so we had our season launched in February of this year. We had it ready by, I would say, end of November, and that was the first time that we had designed, let's say, the first iteration of the game loop. At which point we took it to Decoded, I think, or Sub-Zero conference. We got to test it with a lot of the Polkadot community, and then sort of went back and kept iterating. Now, a couple of things here that I think were really important for us. As I said, we were going to embrace the technology. What were those limitations that we needed to sort of own? One was you're going to need a wallet. You're going to need um, a token balance to be able to play. It's going to have to be on a browser, and it will have to be on chain. So between these four limitations, we also were questioning why would anyway, and how are we going to make this sort of work? So onboarding is really important. There's not a lot that we can do here, right? Except create sort of a pleasant UI where you can explain what you can do, give different options. Given the limitations, especially that we have in our ecosystem with wallets, which is getting a lot better. So we had obviously Polkadot.js that we could use. You could connect to Talisman, you could connect your sub wallet, and we made it quite easy for people to be able um, um, sort of open their wallet, get their wallet, and sort of not leave the game, not leave the environment of the game as much as possible. The second part, which was really important to make this experience work, was that to reverse, as I said, the how NFT drops happen. The way that usually NFT drops happen, team prepares the collection, starts promoting it online, gives a date that says, hey, on that date, at that time, anybody that's whitelisted can jump in and they're going to get it. So essentially, it's a marketing buildup for a experience which is quite horrendous of you trying to get that NFT when it's open, where the only dopamine, let's say, injection that you're getting at that point is the minute that you actually pay money successfully and fees to obtain that NFT. And then you got it and you can look at it. So the reverse would be how about that, that end goal, which is sort of an NFT, you have sort of to work for it. And the way that we did that is try to think, okay, how can we replicate this sort of freemium model or free to play with tokens, which as you can imagine, it's quite easy. All you have to do is create sort of free mints or free tokens where you can start onboarding users. So the way that we would do it is that we would start onboarding users on Discord specifically, and that was done by us, the team. We would ask everybody to DM us. Hey, do you have a wallet address, a Bayou wallet address? If yes, great. Give it to me, and I'll send you a couple of free mints, which you can use when the game starts. So this was before the launch of the game. Or if they didn't know, we would, point them in the right direction, whether that was on Polkadot.js, Talisman, or anywhere else, for them to be able to first go open a wallet, obtain their Bayou address, and come back to us. Was it easy? No. Does it scale? Not very easily, right? I mean, season one, we had about 1,000 players join for 7 days, which it took us a team of at least 5, 6 people being on Discord for quite a few weeks to be able to go through all of these DMs and onboard people and avoid farmers and bots and all of these types of things. Second part, which was really important for us, is how do we deal with an infrastructure, a blockchain, which has 12-second blocks and have any sort of user experience. So if you were to do, I would say, any other pretty much transaction online, which took you 12 seconds, you would be pissed off and you wouldn't do it again. Now, here's where we started being creative. And I think that's a big part of, for all of you, what you can start thinking about in a different way with sort of the technology. So those 12-second blocks for us ended up representing a clock, right? Which you can see sort of here. This was an astral clock. We created the 12 different constellations, right? That was our game loop, right? And everybody can choose something different. And each time that the clock was in a different constellation, that had a different impact on the way that you would forge these different avatars. So for us, the way that we could make that user experience hide that deficiency was that during that forging process, you had to sort of select the avatar that, okay, this is the one that I love, let's say Rote here, and I want to upgrade him. So I get to choose him, and then I have to find from my inventory which ones are matching and would be a good candidate to have a better or more successful forge. Now, this time period, in correlation with that, you have a clock that's turning, that, and once that clock moves to a different position, you have to rethink your forging, meant that we could waste quite a lot of those 12 seconds in a user experience where it didn't feel bad. It didn't feel that there was something deficient here, but it felt like it was by design. So that was probably, I think, our single most difficult and most successful variable that we included in the game loop in order sort of to avoid having to do really bad things. Usually, so how would you identify when there's something going on in the technology? Animations, right? When you see too many animations happening between action one and action B, means that there's a gap that the developer needs to sort of fill here. Problem with animations is that you see it one time, 2 times, the third time you're going to get pissed off with the animation. So we used the slowness of Kusama to our, I wouldn't say to our advantage, let's not take it completely overboard, but we used that technical difficulty and found a creative way that we can give an experience to the end user which makes sense for the technology. And yeah, as you can see here in our game, we had this sort of astral clock, different constellations which matched the different type of forces being, let's say, the different abilities of the awesome Ajuna avatars. And so by creating this relatively easy game loop, we managed to abstract quite a lot of the failures of the technology here. So yeah, and the point of the game was, at the end of the day, that with all of these minting and forging and trying to understand the dynamic and trying to understand the game loop, to be able to forge a legendary. So in our game loop, it would take on average about 400 to 500 mints. So that would mean that you'd have to sacrifice close to 400 to 500 avatars to eventually get your preferred Awesome Ajuna avatar to legendary. And it would take you anywhere between, let's say, somebody who knew exactly what he was doing, about 4 to 5 hours. For most people that sort of had to figure out the strategy and figure out sort of the game loop, it would take them anywhere between 7 and 8 hours. And the fact that from those about 1,100 players that played the first season, that we had over 200 reach a legendary means that really our engagement numbers were through the roof, right? Because you have 20% of, let's say, your active user base reaching the end goal of the game, spending, close to 6 to 8 hours um, in a week to play that game. So by the time that they reached to that legendary, it meant something to them, right? They had spent hours trying to forge it. They had spent sort of, time online trying to figure out the secrets and trying to figure out um, the game loop. So yeah, that's where the value came from. The kicker to all of this is that none of these Osama Yuna avatars are NFTs. And why aren't they NFTs? Because they exist inside the game. They are fungible. Each interaction changes them. So even right now, and I can show you maybe just switch a tab if I can. And let me just check that you can see my screen. So yeah, here this would be the Osama Yuna avatar dashboard. Just yeah. So here's is as I said, so here's the dashboard by which you would be invited to play. And this would be sort of my inventory where I find my Osama Yuna avatars, and I can choose who I want to forge. And if I want to forge somebody, I can then go and select and add my Osama Yuna avatars, and so on and so forth. At the same time, there's a marketplace, right? So in this marketplace, you'll find all of the awesome Ajuna avatars which are forged by the community, which they have put up here in order to be able to trade. Again, none of these right now are NFTs. They're not tokenized. You can still have a marketplace. You can still use them. You can still upgrade them, and so on and so forth. We haven't introduced yet the offboarding of the awesome Ajuna avatars as we're working on it. Actually, we're going to be sharing at Decoded quite a lot of information on sort of our offboarding, which will be able to happen not only within the Polkadot ecosystem in a gasless and real-time way, but also towards Ethereum and Polygon. So for us, it was really important that, as I said before, none of these awesome Ajuna avatars, as long as they exist in the game, are NFTs. We do not promote them as NFTs. We do not claim they're NFTs. They will become NFTs, as I said, once you as a user decide to take them outside of the awesome Ajuna avatars sort of gameplay. You tokenize them, and then you'll be able to take them onto a market. Let me just switch also back to my screen. So again, as I sort of briefly showed, you would choose a character, you would be able to add different awesome Ajuna avatars to sacrifice, right? And by sacrificing them, then that meant that we were making everything in a way deflationary, right? That sort of there was minting, but because you had to sacrifice up to 4 each time that you were trying to forge an increase, by nature you would make sort of the game be deflationary. Depending on your choices, you would either have let's say a high probability forge of success or a lower probability, which for us that we indicated it with a color. Here, as you can see, when the forging took place, it was an orange color, which meant that it was not sort of a successful one or the most successful one. We had a different color to indicate when you've hit the right sort of conditions. And that was a way that we could explain, or sort of the players could find ways to figure out sort of the strategy behind it, or what the game loop actually was. Um, and phase 2 of those, as I said, because up to now none of these are NFTs. So why would I want to make them NFTs? Again, first choice is that I want to take this asset outside of its natural environment. Let's say it's game. And what am I going to do with it then? Right? Usually, what they're done with is to put them on a marketplace, OpenSea, and so on and so forth, which again should be an option available for anyone. For us, what we're going to be launching in parallel with sort of the ability to be able to offboard them into marketplaces is to be able to send them in what we're calling on-chain missions, where the whole idea is that you will be able to take your legendary Awesome Ajuna avatar, now let's say as an NFT, and explore different aspects of Web3 or the blockchain space. So one of the things that I'm actually very interested to ask you to do, for anybody that's interested, is create a mission of your own. So I'll give you now an overview of what these missions are, and what their purpose are, and hopefully you can design one of your own. So as I said, I take an Awesome Ajuna avatar and I want them to explore Web3 ideas, staking, voting, and so on. So the way the beautiful that we can do with gaming is that we can sort of use, again, the technology behind it, but create a very simple narrative. For example, um, I need to get my Awesome Ajuna avatar, my Mogwai, right? Sort of these characters. He needs to go get a pilot license, and then he needs to go get a spaceship in order to go onto planet X, where he needs to find minerals, a hidden gem, and it will take him 2 weeks to come back, and then come back and claim the reward. So that's a game loop, right? But in that game loop, we want to be able to explore um, staking, right? So that means that if I were to have to go on a mission, I would have to stake my NFT, right? He would have to be locked, let's say, for 10 days. Then I would have to unstake him, and then I would have to probably use a claim function in order to be able to get my reward. There's different missions that you can do here. Would be awesome if we can do cross-chain missions. So an example could be that um, we would like my Awesome Ajuna avatar to go to Bill Lampoon from the Web3 Foundation, for example, and I don't know, knock on his door or show him something in order to get from Bill one of his famous Bill coins and return it back. So these are different ways that we want to use a game loop, a game mechanic, in order to explore what's going on in the Polkadot ecosystem, what different features that you can use. So that's one of the things that we're going to be also working with different parachains over the different seasons to see how we can engage their communities or attract new communities to discover or explore Web3 concepts through gaming itself. So different, as I said, different missions that we have. Um, Again, trying to explore different parameters of the Web3 space. And so the goal would be here, and I will share. I will be sharing with the team at Encode some documentation from tomorrow, like for example the GDD, the game design document that we had, or basic concept of it that we had for the Awesome Ajuna avatars, and how we initially started creating cross-chain parachain missions for you to have a look. But what I would like, if anybody is interested, is for anyone who would be interested to have a go in writing their own season of the Awesome Ajuna avatars, and submit, let's say, a 1 or 2 pager executive summary, let's say, of a game design document. We would be super interested in reading those. And the second thing that we would be, I think would be pretty fun, is for you to try and create a cross parachain missions for the Awesome Ajuna avatar. So again, the idea being how we can take an Awesome Ajuna avatar on a journey through different parachains and get them to interact with different functions or utility from these parachains within that sort of game loop and gaming environment that we have created. So I'm quite conscious also of the time. So I think I will stop and try and interact
Hello.
with a few questions or.
Yes. First, like, thank you for the amazing workshop and also like a awesome takeaway, like a last slide, so that all the hackers can remind one more time after this workshop what they can do. We are
Yes.
very looking forward to see like a new, fresh ideas and also like cross-parachain missions. That sounds like so cute. I am really curious what kind of new ideas going to be evolved during this hackathon. Um, I think some of questions you were covering during the chat today, and then like a Ben was like asking several questions. I think the most of them has been already covered. And another thing is just to let people know. Some people were asking if this video gonna be uploaded. Yes. So this is getting recorded right now. Normally we upload a video in 24 hours. So if you want to watch again, you can watch again. If there's some team members who couldn't watch today, like they can watch the recordings. And I think Ben is typing now. So anybody, if you want to ask some questions, we have nice 3 minutes. You can address some questions which Nicholas can answer. Otherwise, also you can ask questions on our Discord server in the Polkadot Hack dedicated channel, so that Ajuna team can answer your questions while you are thinking about your game design.
I will take actually the last point that Ben makes, which is it's actually quite important, right? I mean, which is um, this sort of centralized versus decentralized, and that's where gaming can be, on the one hand, problematic, right? Because when if you ask me, in sort of the 5, 10 things that, let's say, blockchain can offer, where does decentralization rank? If I were a DeFi project, for example, I would probably rank that quite high up because of what we're trying to achieve. For gaming, that would rank, let's say, lower, not in terms of it's not important, but it's the priority of problems that we have to solve. The goal, and that's why, I mean, for us, we built Ajuna really because our vision was on-chain gaming. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but when this, and I hate the term, metaverse comes, and it's not going to be in 2, 3 years, it's probably going to take a decade or more. We see an on-chain future, which is what we're building for. That's why we're using Substrate. That's why we're using pallets. That's why we're not an EVM chain. And that's why sort of most of our focus is taking game engines or game logic and putting it on chain, right? Because you can talk about DAOs, right? You can talk about player governance or user governance, but if the logic is controlled by a single entity, it doesn't matter, right? We can have whatever DAO we want, we can have already sort of or whatever governance we want, but still the logic needs to be on chain. So yeah, Ben, it's against the ethos, but it's the path maybe of least resistance through gaming to get to that sort of end goal.
Yes, yes. And also like as like you already explained a lot of different gradients, like also decentralization is like not only the rank, perhaps like a different perspective, which part is decentralized in this dynamics or what kind of blockchain building blocks are getting used. So that can be also very fun, how each hackers are interpret this and showing us new solutions.
Yeah.
Also, just Niklas shared a Telegram so that like everyone, you can add Niklas and asking some question. This is a great opportunity, isn't it?
Hey, please do. I mean, because it's the only way that we move this space forward, and it's I would say the strongest point of the Polkadot ecosystem that we have an open community. We have sort of a give back mentality, which means that come poke us, come tell us your ideas, come tell us what you're thinking of building. You will find that most of us are more than happy to talk and see how we can help. I wouldn't be, I mean, for me, I would be more than happy if anybody has if, for many of the submissions that you do, it's a great idea. I promise you, we will run an Awesome Ayuna season of Awesome Ayuna avatars based on your idea, right? That's sort of the beauty of it. So be creative, break some stuff, use the technology. Don't shy away with it. We don't want cop outs. Hey, this is running on a centralized server and it has you can log in with your Hotmail. You can, with anything. You can sort of we can create whatever Web3 experience we want by adding a Hotmail and a centralized server, and I'm sure others will do it better. But for us, yeah, let's go and make some. Let's use Kusama for what it was intended to, right? Which was to experiment, break some stuff along the way, but maybe we'll learn something. And more than happy for to do it also with you in the community. So yeah, I don't know if there's any other question, but thank you so much for having me. and I hope you
Thank you.
enjoyed the
Thank you very
no-code
much.
presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure the hacker is going to have some follow capture afterwards, especially when people are asking on the Discord. Also, we will be tagging Ajuna team. So let's see, like in next weeks, what kind of project's going to be, how to say, like a game design going to be built on this. Especially, this is one of the most exciting bounty because we are just, like announcing to all the hackers about this game design document. It's a little bit different from the typical bounties that you are not like a building, but you are like a designing, and then submitting your like a concept. So don't be afraid. If you wanted to build a game, but you didn't know how to start with it, with all the infrastructure and so on, maybe this is a great time to show your idea so that Ajuna team and all different hackers can help you afterwards. I think that's
and we will
much,
just the last
yes.
point. We will make sure the two of us to just put together a little package of some documents or some maybe guidelines for what a game design document or a 2-pager should look like, and we'll put a packet together. Maybe you can share with the community from tomorrow.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We will. Yeah, I think that will be the like also another question like coming along. So like yes, like everyone. Also, if you are not sure what game design document means, we're gonna share the guideline tomorrow so that like you can check it out before they try to think what kind of game or cross-chain, cross-parachain dynamics you can use in your game, so that all those things can be in the document. Okay, I think that's pretty much everyone. Other questions, as I said, please ask in the Discord or like if it's something like a hackathon logistic related submission guide, also don't hesitate to submit any tickets. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Everyone keep hacking and talk to you later.
Hey,
thank you,
thank you
Nick.
very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.